part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hey, before we get to today's episode, I want to spend a few moments to thank you for checking out this podcast. It truly means a lot. I started Press Play Podcast in 2018, and 5 years in, we've grown to about 16 shows with over 20 hosts and have a handful of contracted producers. It's a great little operation with 2 shows in the top 5% of all podcasts and some of the best hosts and journalists you'll ever find. I've learned so much and absolutely love talking to people that have helped me become who I am today. If you're interested in learning more about Press Play Podcast, you can check out our website at pressplaypodcast.com or search us in any podcast platform you use. We mainly cover sports and entertainment. We have a Browns podcast, a Cleveland Cavs podcast, a Guardians podcast, a baseball card collecting podcast, and 2 other sports talk shows. We also have a movie podcast, the Fanfare podcast, which I co-host, a book club podcast, a TV show podcast, a Marvel podcast, a DC podcast, and even a Broadway show podcast. My show is very nuanced. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, feel free to subscribe and leave a 5-star review. That will help other people know that you enjoyed the show. And without further ado, welcome to the Chase Smith Podcast, a conversation on current events and culture. We are proudly part of the Press Play Podcast Network, empowering diverse voices to launch professional, engaging podcasts. With me today, and I'm so excited, a legend, and I don't say that lightly, a legend in Cleveland sports broadcasting. Listen to this. Just listen. An 11-time Emmy Award-winning sportscaster. He's in the Cleveland Broadcasting Hall of Fame. He's a winner of the Chuck Heaton Award from the Cleveland Press Club. He's the host of the Guardians on the Land MLB podcast right here in the Press Play Podcast Network. He also hosts his own show, Telich Talks. In 2008, he retired from full-time anchoring with Fox 8 and moved on to full-time living, the one and only John Telich. John, thanks for joining the podcast.
I am so excited to be on with you, Chase. We've been on with your network for almost a year now.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've been retired since I hung them up in February of 2022, and it's been a whirlwind, and I'm more busy now than I was when I was working full-time chasing Cavaliers, Browns, and Guardians, and Buckeyes, and St. Vincent, St. Mary kids all over the landscape. So it's been great. Retirement has been amazing, but the journey to get to it was, I was so blessed to do it for so many years. And obviously, Chase, to get a chance to do it at the same TV station for, I'm still doing Friday Night Touchdown, our high school football coverage. So, which I'll never give up. I love that. But to do it more than 43 years is a super blessing in our very fickle broadcasting business that we are in now. I'm very blessed that they even want to look at me, much less have me around. So it's a blessing, my man.
That's great. And now, friend of the network, John Sable's over at Fox 8 with Kim. Yep. They got a great group over there now, man. Not that they did it before, but just they just keep on rolling.
Yeah, we got a lot. I worked with some amazing people. Not to make this about Fox 8. I know we want to talk Guardians, but I mean, over the years, I was blessed to work with so many phenomenal sportscasters. Casey Coleman was one time the voice of the Cleveland Browns. He passed away in 2016. He was a warrior that spent a lot of his last years making other people sober and off of drugs. He had quite the journey that he was on himself. So I worked with Casey and, of course, Vince Cellini and Danny Coughlin, who's still with us, the Riz, Tony Rizzo, of course, Kenny Carmen, now, John Sable, who you mentioned, was one of my interns, PJ Ziegler. We've just had so much. Allie LaForce, with TNT and the NBA, was with us in her first year and a half of the business. So what a group of folks that I was blessed to work with. But again, in my retirement, I have the best teammate there is, and that's the bride of 47 years, my wife, Jane. And she's the leadoff hitter and the cleanup hitter in our house.
I love that. Before we pressed record, we were talking family. You have had 3 kids. We have 3 kids. And we didn't really talk about our better halves. 47 years, John. That's incredible, man. That's incredible.
It really has been a phenomenal journey. Chase, we met at college and it was a blind date. We met on a blind date and it worked out fantastic for us because I was a year ahead of her at school, Ashland College. It's now Ashland University. And when we were at school, we met, as I mentioned, met on a blind date. What do they say about first impressions? They're lasting. Well, I thank the Lord that this was not a lasting first impression, because she thought I was the biggest idiot on campus. But somehow she saw me a second time, and we dated, and we got married in 1976 in the summer, 7/17/76. I probably shouldn't give that out. It's more than likely hackers will find a way to get personal information on me.
Oh,
but we got married then, and a year later we had the first of our three children, and it's been a whirlwind journey, and a real blessing that I have her, because I mentioned before, TV stations can be fickle, the business can be fickle, and it's hard to keep relationships strong in this business because it tugs at you in so many directions. I have, the woman who, if not for her, I would be like Chris Farley, living in a van down by the river.
That's amazing. My wife and I, Leslie, 14 years, the 28th. And, I thinking about that this week, because Jimmy Carter, former president, Jimmy Carter, his wife, Rosalind, passed away this week. And
she did. Yes.
He said he was interviewed, I think, by Katie Couric at some point. I don't know if you saw this going around. She ran off a bunch of his accolades and his awards and like the Peace Prize. And he's like, the thing I'm most proud of, the thing that I like won a champion, is that Rosalind said yes. Like that was like his like most proud moment, that when he asked her to marry him, she said yes.
And mine stuck with me all these years. And believe me, and I was joking somewhat about the Chris Farley reference there, but so many aspects of my life improved the minute that this gal from Long Island, New York, came into my life, and then even greater when she said yes. Yeah. And we got married 47, going on 48 years ago. So really blessed, Chase, to be perfectly honest with you.
It's amazing. I was saying I'm going to text you for like parenting 3 kids advice, but now it's going to be just for marriage and life advice, John. I am so thankful just to have you here. But this is not a marriage podcast. This is not a parenting podcast. This is a podcast about the Cleveland Guardians. And yes, I don't know who else to talk with other than the one and only John Telich. So John, you hosted this Guardians pod for us all year long. And I can't help but not think that a lot of people were disappointed in how this year ended up for the Guardians after such a promising and exciting season last year. I think everyone, and what fans and probably like a lot of the players and staff, were expecting a little more this year than, what was it, 76 and 86 or something?
Yeah, third place in the division. Just didn't work out, Chase. And you could point to a lot of things. I think they went out and got Josh Bell. Didn't seem like that worked. They go out and get the veteran catcher. That didn't seem like it was working for them. They assumed, and I don't know if they assumed, they felt maybe SpongeBob SquarePants himself, Oscar Gonzalez, was going to continue doing what he did, but he had his issues. But it all goes back to before the season started, Tristan McKenzie with his issues, and then it just kind of snowballed, and it affected the team going forward, and it showed the strengths of the organization by how they went and got the kids from the farm, and the kids pitch well. And I'm sure we can go into more detail about specific pitchers, but they just didn't have that offense. And as opportune as they were the previous season, at last at bat hits and down to the wire ball games, that they were the recipients of good fortune per se, it just didn't happen this year for them. Their power was down, worst in baseball in terms of home runs and all of those stats that you could recite out of obviously out of a book. But things were missing, things just did not seem to be clicking. They were kind of like the Cavaliers were in that playoff series against the Knicks. They had such a great regular season. Then they go into the series with the Knicks, and just things weren't clicking. And next thing you know, boom, rude awakening, they're out. And the Tito thing, it didn't affect the team, I don't believe, early in the year. But then once the news kind of squirted out and the trade deadline came, and they didn't initially do anything, which prompted the big shots in the front office to go on the road to try to massage their egos and answer any of their fears. And then Naylor being injured at the same time, it all kind of snowballed, and they're on the outside looking in.
It's interesting you brought up the Cavs because I think in a lot of ways these franchises like favor each other, right? They have a lot of promising young players that are cornerstones of teams that you expect to be around for a long time, who had a lot of success early that maybe took both leagues by surprise, and then just kind of whether they came crashing down to reality or, just part of like the learning curve. You can't help but be excited about the future of this club, which we'll talk about later.
Sure.
But this season, I think it just had to leave a bad taste in their mouth. Yes, the injuries to McKenzie, who they were touting before he was injured as like, this guy is going to like impact the league. Like this is his year. And so that was a tough way to start. And then to be almost, they were kind of sellers at the deadline. Like they kind of like rolled over.
They didn't seem to be because it was a year where when the deadline came, they were obviously very much in shouting distance. I mean, they were there.
I think it's like three or 5 game. Like there was some like 3 to 5 game gap like throughout like that part of the season.
Very catchable at that time of the year. Very doable. My gosh, look at I think the Diamondbacks. Where were they? In the middle of the summer, nobody's talking about them. And then, how far what they were able to accomplish. So, you look at that, how things were at the deadline. And then the weird part was then afterwards, they went and got all the bargain basement, the Guardian Angels, and went and picked up those guys. And you're thinking that was clever. But you wanted to see a little bit more commitment at that trading deadline. It didn't happen for them. The whole year, they still, were missing the power. The outfield, certainly needs a boost, more power in the outfield. You can throw some names out, potential guys to go and get and all that sort of stuff. But just everything didn't really seem to work for them, didn't seem to click for them. And that's a shame because, Chase, they had almost 42% more attendance at the ballpark this past year. So you had more people going to see them in person. And now as we head into the off season, you wonder about some stuff. The payroll projects to be like 83 million, somewhere in the 80s. That's very low by everybody's standards, obviously. And then you wonder about the effects of this whole baseball, the Bally Sports contract. They got like 55 million, was it 55 million from it in 2023. They're kind of in limbo right now with that Diamond Sports Group and Bally Sports and who's going to take over the broadcast. What can they get out of it? Will that affect the bottom line? Did they make the recent move with trades with that in mind? A lot of speculation when the team is trying to do it with smoke and mirrors sometimes with the payroll the way it is.
Cleveland is a Browns town, and it always has been, and it probably always will be. I think the Cavs make a lot of noise, but the Guardians are always third. It's just how it seems to always be. And I can't help but think with Tito retiring, it kind of saved the team a lot of negative like conversation or headlines or some why didn't they do whatever. I think Tito almost like the last great thing he did for this club was these like expectations, whether they are fair or unfair with these young players going into year 2, kind of like took the heat off them and kind of absorbed a lot of that. And no one wanted to crap on the team when they're celebrating Tito, the greatest manager in club history. I'm going to say that. I mean, I don't think
I think so.
And so I think as disappointing as it was, we didn't see the full volume of that because it was Tito's last hurrah. We wanted to celebrate him.
Yeah. And you could tell that he was beaten down somewhat, not just by, them not playing as well last year, but I think it was just the accumulation of the last several years where he missed time and Sandy had to fill in or you had, instances where you just could tell that, he was laboring. And so you hope now that, he gets a clean bill of health. He already had the shoulder, I believe, taken care of. There's more stuff that's going to happen for him. You just want him to be happy. I mean, this guy won Manager of the Year 3 different times in 11 years. That's absolutely absurd. It's phenomenal what he did, and especially the ability that he had to come into a situation and then that year already, take them to a wild card game against Tampa and become Manager of the Year for the first of those 3 times. You're right in some ways. It's like you're going out on a picnic and the Guardian state of being late in the season was, they're going to be having a picnic on this dirt, grass, broken up, and stones and broken bottles. And then Francona was this beautiful tablecloth that they kind of spread over that to mask it, so that you would think about, wow, we're going to have a nice little picnic here. That's going to be cool.
It's like you use words for a living, John. It's like you use words for a living. That was beautiful.
And it just popped into my mind, and just as quickly it left on the other side. So he was able to mask that. And truly the great ones do that, Chase. I think in any realm. I can recall asking Mike Brown. I can recall asking Dan Gilbert, all these people about LeBron, saying, can you get a true sense and a true evaluation of how good you are when you have a transcendent talent that kind of covers up, is the masking agent, is the duct tape that makes you not think about those poor aspects of your team. And I think Terry Francona had that kind of ability. Phenomenal communicator. He read the room well. He knew how to play off the young kids. He was self-deprecating. All those not holier than thou, made fun of himself a lot, but he knew the game, had the nice, I thought he had the nice mixture between, there are guys that stand there with the analytics guy right on their shoulder, and he was aware of all that stuff, but he still oftentimes went with his baseball instincts, because he grew up in the game, he played the game, he's managed the game, he coached the game, and he went and did it his way. So they were very fortunate to have him as their manager for those so many years. But I will say this, and I do defend them at times, because they are in a league where it's so slanted at times towards the big money teams. And yet that's no guarantee, as we've seen. We saw it this year, the Mets, the Yankees, so on and so forth. Not a guarantee that you're going to be in the Fall Classic because you spent more than $200 million or whatever it is. And so with Francona, you got pure baseball. You got a man who really, would handle that back end of the bullpen, who could set things up as well as anybody. And you just wanted, I always wanted to see what they could do if they had, a budget even close to what some of these other teams had. And that's why I go back and say it's a good organization in the sense of the belief in the guys in the front office, in Antonetti, in Cherney, and all these guys that work so well together, and are always seem to be one step ahead of the posse when it comes to just deciding what's the best front office type of talent. A lot of their guys go elsewhere and flourish and do well in other organizations because of what they were taught there. And I think that, they've always had that, but it would be nice to have a franchise that has that forward thinking and that ability to be out there in front of people, but yet has the kind of money some of the other big boys seem to have.
I loved how you were describing Tito and kind of gave us a little behind the scenes of how he is in the clubhouse, how he is with the young players, and the way that you were describing him kind of sounded like almost like a little bit of their new manager, right? Steve Vogt seems to share a lot of those same kind of quirks that made Tito a favorite.
Yeah, I think he does. And that was, I popped around and listened to a lot of the experts, a lot of the former players, Yonder Alonso, individuals that, have network jobs or are in the limelight and can give you their opinions on trends and things of that nature. And all of them spoke glowingly of the potential for what Steven can do. Very closely removed from actually being a player. He was a good player in his career. 2 times he was an all-star, one of those guys you'd see come into town. He just had that kind of gritty sensibility about him. A guy that's been a bullpen in the bullpen as a coach very early in his coaching career, as we've seen, because he's only been out of the game a couple of years. And it seems like those types of guys seem to flourish as managers. They just have a better handle on everybody else in the organization. They're thoroughly prepared. Other guys were likening him to Buddy Black. That's a very nice compliment. Bud's done very well as a coach and as a manager, if you will, in Major League Baseball, former Cleveland Indians pitcher, as you all know. And so there's a lot of good vibes about him. I get a real nice sense about Steven. And so we'll see. We'll see what happens as he takes over a young club with still a lot of question marks, but first and foremost with that young pitching core that we saw a lot of this year. And that was a blessing in disguise, per se. I think it portends for an exciting year coming up with that pitching as the kind of core focus and strength of the team.
Yes, I wasn't shocked. I think catchers on a baseball team, they're kind of like the quarterback of the team. They do a lot that maybe fans don't realize, whether they're calling plays or, I know players look to the dugout for shifts, but the catcher kind of has all that in his brain. It's not shocking to me that a catcher so, closely removed from playing is able to translate that well into coaching. And I mean, he seems like he's going to fit into Cleveland. It seems like he is like almost destined to to manage following Tito. And it seems, like Tito is going to, obviously he's not going to be there, but I can imagine Tito being available to Steven for any type of,
you're
whatever
saying, well, will he be a phone call away to, I would think he certainly wouldn't turn down any phone calls, but I get the sense as the year ended that he really wants to see how life can be for him without being in baseball. Speaking about Terry Francona, although I certainly wouldn't, first of all, get healthy. That's number one for him.
Yes.
So you get healthy and get more peace of mind, kind of get the anxiety out of your psyche, if you will, because it was a very difficult job fighting his illnesses and then trying to be a major league manager in a competitive league and all that stuff. Just take care of that stuff. But I still think the love of baseball, that's not going to leave him. My love of television hasn't left me in a year and a half. I still love all my former colleagues and all that sort of stuff. So I think, he'll stay close, as close as he wants to be. And I know they would certainly welcome him, any kind of advice that they send out his way and he's able to send back their way. But I think Steven, he's going to need some people to lean on, but he seems like just a real stand-up kind of a guy that will be able to handle this new environment for him. And a lot of people say, whoa, why are they, here we go. They hired a manager that, had no managerial experience, but it's worked out for other guys in the past in this organization. In fact, the greatest one in the history of the Cleveland Indians was their player shortstop manager, Lou Boudreau in 48, the last time this franchise won a World Series championship. They were being run by a 28-year-old shortstop who happened to be a Hall of Fame potential player, which he was. And so they were able to get it done. I'm not saying Steven was a Hall of Fame player, but he's not that far removed from being a player himself. So if he can navigate that, those days where they're going to look for some real tough leadership, and then also he'll be able to walk across the divide where they say, this guy, it wasn't that long ago, he was one of us. And so, how do we ramp up our respect for him in the manner that we maybe had for Terry Francona, who had earned it as a manager all those years, World Series championships, going to the World Series here in Cleveland, all that stuff. So it's going to be fun to see how he navigates this whole thing. And I just have a good feeling about him. We'll wait and see what happens. Yeah.
John, let's take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about some offseason moves, the young pitching core, and a little outlook on 2024, some more exciting young guns for this club that just kind of keeps these top prospects. Stick around. The Chase Smith podcast and the Guardians of the Land MLB podcast. We're going to cross post this to both feeds. Chase Smith, John Telich will be right back. The holiday season is here, and if you're looking to get your girl some jewelry, maybe a nice set of earrings, you need to check out Lorraine and Lynn. Lorraine and Lynn makes polymer clay earrings, which are lightweight, flexible, and perfect for every occasion. My wife and I both have multiple pairs. Actually, our daughter does as well, and they are so comfortable. We love them, and they look fantastic. You can find Lorraine and Lynn on the web at lorraineandlynn.weebly.com or on Instagram. I'll make sure to post the links in my show notes. And now, only for the Chase Smith podcast listeners, you can use code CHASE10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. That's CHASE10 at checkout. You will not be disappointed, and I promise you'll quickly find yourself wanting another pair of earrings from Lorraine and Lynn. Check them out. All right, we are back. The Chase Smith podcast, Guardians of the Land MLB podcast special episode. John Telich here. We're talking Guardians. We just had so much fun talking about the season at large. Tito, Steve Vogt. Here we are. We are in the off season, and I almost said Cavs. The Cavs are playing the 76ers right now on TNT. It is the in-season tournament. One of the more surprising moves, I think some people, just because it's a name, pitcher Plesac was as a free agent. Was that something you were expecting, John?
I think he kind of reached the end of his road with the organization. So I think, he's not going to be part of their plans, at least in my estimation. I think what you want to look forward to seeing is what happens with some of those younger pitchers that came in 2023 and really showed what they can do. We saw Logan Allen, we saw Tanner Bybee, second man in the league in the voting for American League Rookie of the Year, had a phenomenal year, had the most wins on the team. He won 10 games, ERA just under 3, really impressive. And then the big hoss, Gavin Williams, so much potential and promise there. So going into next season, you're going to be looking at those 3 guys. Now, of course, the situation with Bieber is what it is. I mean, right now, because he had that injury that he dealt with for much of the latter end of the season, that's going to affect what types of suitors may be out there, or what type of compensation would be coming the Guardians' way as far as that is concerned. So, you still have that youngster Daniel Espino. He's on the 40-man roster, but he hasn't pitched in almost 2 years now, Chase. But he was at one time thought to be the best young pitcher in the system. So there's some names to think about. I'm just excited to see the growth from Logan Allen, the growth from Williams, and the growth from Bybee from year 1 to year 2, because in year 1, for obvious reasons, Terry was trying not to, use them too much, because, he wants that growth pattern in their careers to be such where they can have good success this year, or that last year, and then develop it and have it go forward into this next season. What are we going to see from McKenzie? And then, I haven't seen any transactions. I believe a week ago was the start of the clock for 7 days from then for them to make some kind of a move with Cal Quantrill. We know the scenario with Quantrill. He was on the hook to come back this year and earn like $6.6 million, and it had to make some moves related to him. They traded away Lopez. They went out and got they traded away De Los Santos as well, and then they went out and got Scott Barlow. He's a veteran. He can be in their bullpen. He's had saves. I think he had 13 saves for the Royals in this most recent time. So there's going to be a lot of shuffling around, but I think the bottom line for this franchise going forward is, can they get more power? Can they get some guys that can get the ball out of the ballpark, because they run pretty well. They play defense. They had 2 Gold Glovers once again, the same 2 guys, so they can do that. Yeah, exactly. Kwani and Jimenez. And so, they both can get the job done as far as that is concerned. They just need more power. They got to find a way to get power. There's names thrown out there, Soler, again, we're in that time of the year, Chase, where names are going to start popping up, like mushrooms in a forest.
I got a name for you. I want to wait until There's a couple of things I'll talk about pitching. Are you concerned about Class A? Are you concerned what you saw last year?
Well, I think first of all, the clock got to him in the beginning there, and I think that was a big adjustment for him. But what I think a lot of people are realizing is that he had very few he had a lot of save situations that were one-run affairs, and I'm not making excuses for him, but there was a lot on his plate, and I think there were a lot of sometimes guys who have save situations where they walk in and they've got a 3-run lead and they give up 1 or 2 and they come out with the save. He didn't have that kind of a situation for himself last year.
Mm-hmm.
I think it caught up to him just a bit. And again, in the beginning of the year, I think he was a bit rattled with the way the clock shifted, how he was out there on the hill. You saw a lot of the kids that came up from the minors, like Bybee and Williams and Logan Allen. They came up and they didn't seem to have any troubles because last year it was used in minor league baseball, to test out the clock, as it were. So, yeah. But I think it was an issue for Emmanuel Clase. But who's back there with him? You got Stephan, who's back there with him. They did trade away Lopez, who was a late innings kind of a guy. I shouldn't say they traded him away. He got a 3-year deal for, I think, 3 years, $10 million a season down in Atlanta. So, and more power to him. If you can get paid.
Yeah,
but
man.
So I'm just excited to see what these young pitchers can do if they can get more power. And then you kind of go from there.
That's a really good point. The lack of power hitting and maybe run support definitely plays a role in a lot of relief pitching. And I'm sure it's mental too. And if you lose a couple straight, which he did, then I think pitching is very much a mental, very like a mental battle, just as much as it is, one-on-one battle against the batter or the runners or whatever. It's very mental. And it definitely seemed it wasn't, some of the celebrations were extra, like when he did get a save, he was like, oh, he was really needed that one or something. It seemed very emotional for him, which I'm sure it was.
Yeah, but a couple of years in a row, 40 saves, certainly nothing to sneeze at. Very strong accomplishment in Major League Baseball. That's the toughest job, man. You're out there. One night you have a rough night, and if you're Travis Kelce, like last night, he had a rough night, playing pro football, but he's got 8 days to get his mindset for the next time he goes out on the football field. Whereas Emmanuel Clase, you blow it on a Tuesday, you're back out there more than likely on Wednesday night. You got to get the job done.
So the Guardians, and I think myself, John, are really banking on some of their young guns to provide some power. I think they're going to feel pressured to add a name for power. Yeah. But one thing we know about this, about this, they don't cave to fan pressure, who they want or what, whatever. And I think they're going to roll with Manzardo coming up and some of these young guys that have, and AAA, but I think they're going to see what they got, man. I don't think they're going to try to bring in a big name this offseason. I don't.
Well, I think you also have to look around the division. I would get the sense that you might see a slight pulling back of how much expenditures are going on up in Minnesota, how much they're going to have towards their final payroll numbers. And that being the case, that could open things up for Cleveland. I would expect to see Manzardo, someone to really watch in spring training. They certainly had their eyes all over him in the Arizona Fall League, things of that nature. So someone like that is going to be kind of like the poster boy for Guardians baseball down in Goodyear, I would assume, next spring. And then again, the maturation process of those young pitchers that they have. You still have Stephan, who's been a steady guy for them for the most part in the back end of the bullpen. You've got Clase, who is an all-star. You have those 2 Gold Glovers. You've got, we haven't even mentioned Josh Naylor's name. And he was the one guy who went down towards the end, towards that deadline that really affected this ball club. It's just a real baller. And we haven't mentioned Jose. So much of what the good fortunes of this team in the last 7-8 years have been centered around this young guy who only got a $25,000 bonus to sign out of Bonnie, the Dominican Republic, and look what he's turned into, just the franchise player. So there's some real good parts on
Real
this
good.
club. Going to be fun to see exactly how things kind of shake out for them. We'll see what happens there.
It's going to be really hard to not just be really, really, really excited about the prospect of what this could look like moving forward. I mean, it's just so many strong pieces. It would, especially with the young pitching, you can have some young pieces in the lineup, but to partner that with just all of this, potential in the pitching staff. I mean, it's just, let's go, John. Let's go. I think 2024, I think could be magical. I really do.
Well, there certainly is potential, because if those kids mature, the starting pitchers mature, and they fortify that bullpen and get a little bit more power, you start out as good a shape as just about anybody in your division. Certainly can play with the Twins day in and day out, the White Sox, the Royals, and what have you, and Detroit. It's a good division to be in.
Yes.
There's a lot of teams that are they're kind of changing their psyches, how they're playing baseball, and the way baseball changed a year ago. Teams that were scrappy and ran a lot. I think the Guardians were 5th in the league in stolen bases, so they had the ability to make things happen with their legs. I would expect more of that, but if they can get more power that they can obviously rely on, like a year ago, they thought that Josh Bell would be an answer, and he didn't seem to be, at least not in a Guardians uniform. And you would hope that, Bo Naylor matures a bit, gets a little bit more pop and a little bit more seasoning on his bat in terms of, knowing what types of pitches certain pitchers will use against him. He'll mature. I think he's going to be there for quite some time now. He's a young talent that they can kind of, look at as a kind of a cornerstone. They got Jimenez, obviously Kwani. There's talent there. You always have the issues of, everybody whining about Straw. He's a phenomenal fielder, but, always seemed like when there was a big moment in the game, look who's coming up to the plate. It was Miles Straw, and you want someone other than Miles Straw for the most part. I don't want to knock the kid, but in some ways you do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll say this, Manzardo is a great baseball name. That is a great name on the back of a jersey. And I think very easily, if he has a couple strong games with a jump, be some Manzardo fever going on, man. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm expecting a lot of great things, and they're doing a lot of work on the ballpark, Progressive Fields, so it's just going to be, I think they're really preparing for a strong 3, 4, 5-year run of sellouts and just a lot of fun at the park. And it's already a fun experience. Like even last year was great. I mean, I just think partner that with a winning club that's like, let's go, John. I'm all on board, man. I am all on board. Let's go.
Hey, man, it's late November, and you want it to be early April already.
I'm ready, man. Let's go. It's gonna be great.
Now, there can be a level of excitement for this team, and it's a new era. You have to say, the ballpark's not going to be totally redone. It's going to take another year, but you're going to have changes that weren't there a year ago. People are going to walk into the ballpark in April and go, "Whoa, okay, this is cool. That I'm looking forward to that." Whatever the changes may be, you have a new manager. You've got 3 outstanding, prospects as starting pitchers that can only grow, and you've got their control for many years. Then you have Jose Ramirez anchoring the offense, along with Josh Naylor, his little brother Bo. You've got 2 very good defenders, if you will, or guys with gloves, the Gold Glovers out there. So there's a lot of things to get excited about. I think you also have to be pragmatic as well, and not figure that everything that you planned on happening perfectly does just that, because a lot of sometimes the best laid plans of mice and men are just a disaster.
But this is a podcast. That's what we do. It's all going to work out, John.
There are no rules here, baby.
Oh man. Well, this has been so much fun. I can't wait just for the season to come. Until then, we have Cavs, and I think there's another team in Cleveland that's surpassing expectations.
Apparently they've been making waves lately. I can't quite catch their name. I'm trying to. Anybody that talks about it? Of course, you've got pods that talk all about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. Holly Wetzel, Tyvis Powell, they're doing their thing. Yep. They got a great job. And Sam Amico, John and I talk about the Cavs. We got Cleveland sports all covered, John.
Exactly, man.
You're a 3 spot. We don't really have one for the charge, but you got the 3 spot and cleanup. You do it all, man. You do it all. Well, that does it for this episode of the Chase Smith podcast and the Guardians of the Land MLB podcast. Thank you all so much for downloading and listening. Shouts to the Press Play Podcast Network for making this possible. Follow us online at Press Play Pods. Visit our website, pressplaypodcast.com, to keep up with all of our shows and network news and sponsorship information. If you enjoyed today's episode, leave us a review. A 5-star rating would be awesome. It really helps people as they're looking to find what pod to listen to say, hey, this pod sounds pretty good. John, plugs all that you can plug, man. Where are you at on the airwaves if we want to hear more of John Telich?
That's really kind of you. Again, I've had a podcast that I started when I was still doing every television every night at Fox 8. It's called Telich Talks. You mentioned it before, so I appreciate you allowing me. And the beautiful thing about the pod, as you know, because you've got your own network of various types of shows, is that you can talk about different bents that people have in their lives, and that's the best way I could describe what my pod Telich Talks is all about. I've had Sandy Alomar on, I've had former players, I've had current players, and all that. Most of the time, my stories are people that have found, maybe come to that. That fork in the road, and they made a decision that altered their life. And it could be coming out of dealing with cancer. It could be a situation where they were being bullied at school. All different types of stories that I've been able to uncover through. I've done 120 episodes of it. So I really love doing it. If you give us give me a chance, I appreciate that. That's Telich Talks on all of your podcast platforms, and just people that inspire and want to make a difference in their lives and other people's lives. And it's real fun, because when I did TV all those years, there were a few opportunities for us to really sit down and dig our teeth into subjects, and which we can do with podcasts every day of the week. You really want to break down, the double play combination of the Cleveland Guardians. You can spend 40 minutes on it if you want. And there'll be a lot of people that want to hear that type of talk. Or you can talk about cleanup hitters around Major League Baseball, or is baseball going too fast? Do they need to change the rules from what they did a year ago? All that stuff. So that's what I've had a real lot of fun doing on the pod, Chase, is to dig deep, talk for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes with someone, and really find out what makes them tick and what part of their life kind of steered them to the point where they are right now. So it's fun doing it. Thanks.
Talk about Guardians. You just had Gabriela Cruz on, who's the in-game host of the Guardians, about her charity Love Doesn't Shove, which is an incredible story. That if you get a chance, check that episode out on Telich Talks. She's been on Guardians of the Land before. We've had her on to help talk guards. So John, thank you so much for tonight. This has been great, and you have a wonderful holiday season.
Same to you. I hope you and your young family do. Me and my old family will try to manage the same.
All right. Be safe. Thank you, sir.
You got it, buddy.